Have you ever felt like you were the one left behind in the house you once called home? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself, even if it meant breaking up a family relationship? I'm Jasmine Rojas, and my life came crashing down one afternoon while I was buried in law school. A 22-year-old college student hunched over a library desk, my phone buzzed, and I glanced at the screen. It was a text from my dad. "You're not my daughter anymore. Go be yourself." My heart pounded in my chest and my hands went cold. I reread it, thinking maybe I'd misread it, like it was some kind of autocorrect disaster. No, the words were crystal clear, sitting there like a middle finger to my entire existence. I called him back immediately, my fingers fumbling so much I almost dropped the phone. Straight to voicemail. I tried my mom. Voicemail. "Dylan, my brother? You guessed it." All three of them ignored it, decided to give up. I sat there, staring at the phone, the noise of the library fading to a dull growl in my ears. What the hell had I done? I wasn't exactly a saint, but I was a good kid, you know. The one who studied hard, worked part-time at a coffee shop to pay for my books, and called home every Sunday to make sure Mom wasn't stressed about the bills. I didn't party, didn't do drugs, I'd even walk across the street. So why was my dad acting like I'd burned the house down? I scrolled through the family group chat, desperate for clues. Nothing strange, just the usual stuff. Mom asking if I needed socks, Dylan begging for gas money, Dad sending his classic "work is killing me" complaints. But then I noticed something. My parents had been quiet for the past few weeks. Barely any texts, no calls. But what about Dylan? He was acting weird, asking random questions like, "Are you coming home soon, Jazz? Or do you still have that old laptop?" I ignored him. My brain was screaming at me to do something, anything. I couldn't just sit there surrounded by nerds. So I did what any rational person would do. I grabbed my backpack, ditched my study group without a word, and ran to the bus stop. I'd be home by 4 o'clock to figure out why my family decided to kick me out of their lives. I plopped down in the chair, staring out at the freeway. My mind replayed every family moment I could think of. Christmas dinner, summer barbecues, the time Dylan and I snuck out to pee in the neighbor's yard and my mom grounded us for a month. We weren't perfect, but we were who we were. Dad with his cheesy jokes, Mom always worrying about my hair. Dylan, the kid I babysat for while Mom worked overtime. How do you go from that to "you're not my daughter"? I pulled out my phone again, hoping someone would text back. Nothing. I sent a message to the group chat, "What's up? Please tell me." It sat there, marked sent, but ignored. I tried calling back. The same 3-letter voicemail. Then suddenly my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered so quickly it almost hurt my neck. "Hello? Mom? Dad?" My voice was a pathetic mix of hope and panic. Silence. Then a deep voice I didn't recognize. "Don't come home." They hung up. I froze, my thumb hovering over the redial button. Who was it? A joke? A wrong number? My gut twisted, telling me it wasn't a coincidence, but I didn't have time to be a detective. I shoved my phone in my pocket and hugged my backpack tighter, as if it could protect me from whatever was waiting. By the time the bus pulled into my hometown, it was dark. I practically sprinted the 3 blocks home, my sneakers clicking on the pavement, my breath coming out in clouds. I turned the corner, expecting to see our little yellow house with its sagging porch and Mom's cheesy gardening gnomes. Instead, I stopped. The house was pitch black. No lights, no cars in the driveway. And there, nailed to the front gate like a punch in the face, was a sign. Sold. Sold. Since when? We weren't rich, but we weren't broke either. Dad had a steady factory job. Mom was a good yardstick. I dropped to my knees sinking into the damp grass, and ripped one side off. My clothes, the jeans I'd left in the closet, the sweater my mom had knitted me for Christmas last year, even my old high school hoodie. The next bag held my books, law texts, my old novels, and the last, family photos, some torn in half, some crumpled like trash. I sat back on my heels and tried to breathe. This wasn't just a fight, this was over. They'd packed me up and thrown me out like junk mail. I rummaged through my pockets, searching for anything that might explain it. Tucked inside a folded shirt, I found a piece of paper, crumpled and smudged. It had numbers scrawled on it, big numbers like dollar amounts, and 2 words, "pay off debt." Debt? What debt? We didn't have any debt. I didn't know. I stuffed it into my pocket, my brain too tired to make sense of it. I don't know how long I sat there surrounded by my life in trash bags. Hours, probably. My phone remained silent no matter how many times I checked. I sent another message to the group chat. I'm here. Where are you? Why is the house for sale? No response. I tried Dylan's personal number, leaving a voicemail that sounded desperate. Dylan, it's me. What's going on? Call me back. A car drove by, its headlights sweeping over me, and I caught a glimpse of Mrs. Carter, the nosy neighbor across the street, looking out the window. She didn't come out, didn't wave, just stared at me like I was a stray dog. Thanks for the warm welcome, ma'am. I dragged the trash bags out onto the porch out of the dew and leaned against the door. My eyes stung, but I wasn't going to cry. Crying was for people who knew what was going on, and I didn't know anything. I thought back to that creepy phone call. Don't come home. Too late, you mysterious stranger. I was home, and it wasn't home anymore. My family was gone, my stuff was in the trash, and I didn't know why. All I had was that stupid note, and the nagging feeling that I was missing out on something big. As the sky began to turn gray, I made my decision. I wasn't going to sit here like a kicked puppy. If no one was going to tell me what the hell was going on, I was going to find out for myself. The county office opened at 8. They'd have a record, right? Something about the house being sold, something to explain why my life had been ripped away from me. I stood up and glared at the sold sign as if it had personally offended me. You think you can erase me? I argued, half to the house, half to my family, wherever they were. Let's see how I handle this. Then I arrived at the county office at dawn, having found my childhood home sold and my belongings discarded like last week's leftovers. I pushed open the glass doors of the county office, the kind that creaked as if they were genuinely offended by your existence. The place smelled of stale coffee and capitalism, with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like a swarm of judgmental bees. I joined the ranks of cranky early risers, clutching my ID like it was a life preserver. My plan was simple. Get the sale documents, find out who signed what, and maybe, just maybe, figure out why my life had been thrown into chaos. When I finally reached the counter, the clerk barely looked up from his computer. Name and address, he droned, as if I were interrupting his life's work. Jasmine Rojas, I said, handing over my ID. I need the sale documents for 1427 Maple Street. My voice was more even than I felt, which was a small miracle considering I wasn't sleeping and was completely pissed. He typed something, frowned at the screen, and typed again. Huh, he said, which was never a good sign from someone who held your fate in his hands. That property was transferred 2 weeks ago. Quick sale, all cash, signed by... He squinted as if the screen were insulting him. Maria and Victor Rojas. Through a middleman, Dylan Rojas. I blinked. Wait, what? Dylan Rojas? My brother, Dylan, the kid who can't even microwave popcorn without setting off the smoke alarm? Dylan was selling the house? Yeah, the salesman said, losing interest. Looks like he did the paperwork. But it's weird. It happened faster than Usain Bolt could run 100 yards. Not exactly standard protocol, he barked, as if shady real estate deals were just a regular Tuesday. My brain was churning, trying to process this. My parents signing off on the house was bad enough, but Dylan was the middleman? It was like finding out your dog secretly ran a hedge fund. I leaned forward, gripping the counter. Can you tell me anything else? Like who bought it, or why so quickly? He gave me a look that said he'd rather be anywhere else. That's all public information. The buyer was a holding company, Maple Grove LLC. As for why, I don't understand. You'd have to ask the seller. He shoved my ID back and waved me off as if I were yesterday's news. I staggered out of the office, my mind reeling. Dylan, damn Dylan, the same Dylan who'd sold my old bike for beer money, now playing real estate mogul. I wanted to laugh, cry, or punch something, maybe all three. But the salesman's comment about the sale being weird bothered me. Something was wrong, and I wasn't about to let it go. I was halfway there, cursing my bloodline, when I ran into Mrs. Nguyen, our old neighbor who had always had a gift for knowing what was going on. She was watering roses, but when she saw me, her face twisted into something between pity and disgust. Oh great, here we are. Jasmine, she said, her voice dripping with judgment. You've got the nerve to show up here. You know your parents had to sell their house for you, right? What kind of girl would do that? I stopped dead, my jaw almost hitting the pavement. Excuse me, I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. What are you talking about? I didn't do anything. She snorted, pointing her snout at me like it was a loaded gun. Oh, don't be naive. Your mom cried to me last month about the mess you made, debt, trouble, whatever. They had no choice but to sell the house to cover up your mistake. Shame on you. Debt, trouble. I wanted to scream. I was a broke college kid who had to budget for ramen. I didn't have debt. Trouble? The craziest thing I'd done recently was sneak an extra cup of coffee at work. But the neighbor wasn't done yet. Your parents were so ashamed, she continued. They wouldn't even tell me the details, just that it was all because of you. I stood there, frozen, her words cutting into my heart. Ashamed? Ashamed of me? I had spent my life trying to make them proud. All A's. My debt was nothing to write home about, but it planted a seed of doubt in my stomach that made my stomach churn. What if I had screwed up somehow? What if I had missed something, a bill, some mistake? I brushed it off, determined to let her bother me. Miss Gwen probably thought I was running a gang from my dorm room. That's when I noticed the seal. My personal seal, the one I'd left at home the week before when I'd come to visit for the weekend. It was a small seal, like a legal signature for certain documents in our community. I'd left it in my room, and Dylan was there, sprawled out on the couch, joking about borrowing it for an autograph. I laughed it off, thinking he was just being silly as usual, but now I wasn't so sure. I pulled out my phone, my finger hovering over Dylan's number. I wanted to call him, demand an answer, but I stopped myself. If he was avoiding me, and he was, then yelling at his voicemail wouldn't help. Instead, I thought back to that visit. He'd asked me weird questions, like how sealing worked for real estate matters, saying he was thinking about business school. It ignored him, too preoccupied with my mother's cooking to care. God, I was such an idiot. Sitting on the park bench, I tried to piece it all together. The house had been sold 2 weeks ago. I'd broken the seal at the same time. Dylan's name on the papers, Mrs. Nguyen's debt nonsense. It's like a puzzle with no pieces that fit together, but they all pointed to one thing. Something was seriously wrong, and my brother was in deep trouble. I decided to test Mom one more time. Maybe she'd break down, give me something to work with. I dialed the number, holding my breath as it rang. I was stunned when she picked up. "Jasmine?" she said, her voice weak and shaky as if she'd been crying for days. "Mom, what's going on?" I blurted, the words pouring out like a waterfall. "The house is gone, my stuff's in the trash, and Dad says I'm no longer his daughter. What did I do?" There was a long pause, the kind that makes you want to crawl out of your skin. "Don't ask me that," she said finally. "It's over. Just leave it alone." Her voice caught, and I heard a hoarse scream behind me, Dylan's voice, sharp and angry. "Maria, hang up!" he shouted, and the line went dead. I stared at the phone, my pulse pounding. Dylan told Mom to hang up? Since when did he give that order? I tried to call back, but the call went straight to voicemail, as if she'd turned off her phone. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from a mixture of anger and fear. What was he hiding, and why did Mom let him control her like this? As I sat there, fuming, my phone rang with a text message. Unknown number, like the creepy call from the bus. "Don't trust Dylan." That's right. No name, no explanation, just those 3 words staring at me like a warning sign in neon. I tried to text back, but it bounced back. The number was blocked, of course. I leaned back, the cold stone of the bench digging into my spine. Dylan, the middleman. Dylan screaming at my mother. Dylan tied to some shady deal that didn't make sense. My little brother, the one I'd saved from detention and taught how to tie a tie, was starting to look like the architect of my own apocalypse, but I wasn't ready to believe it, not yet. I needed proof, something concrete to shove in his face and say, "Explain yourself, asshole." I stood up, brushing the dirt from the bench onto my jeans. If Dylan thought he could manipulate me and leave me in the dark, he was about to learn a hard lesson. I'd always been the smart one, the one who fixed things when he broke them. This time, I was going to fix things by exposing his secret. Step 1. Follow him. Find out what he was doing, who he was seeing, and why my family was acting like I had committed treason. "Come on, little brother," I argued, heading for the bus stop. "You're not the only one who can play dirty." After learning that my brother Dylan was somehow the mastermind behind the sale of our house, and that my neighbor had decided I was the devil incarnate, I was no good. I didn't have Dylan's current address, shocking since he'd disappeared from me more than a bad blind date, but I did have something better, his Instagram. Oh, right. My brother, the genius who orchestrated a shady real estate deal, was still dumb enough to post stories like he was auditioning for Influencer of the Year. I scrolled through his profile from a disposable account, don't judge and not petty, and there it was, a blurry photo of him at a swanky downtown bar, tagged the Rusty Anchor. Subtle, Dylan. I headed for the bus downtown. The Rusty Anchor was in a part of town where drinks cost more than my textbooks, all neon signs, and a faux industrial vibe. The perfect place for Dylan to play the big guy. My plan was simple: follow him, see who he was seeing, and maybe get a hint as to why he was turning our family into a soap opera trash heap. If I was lucky, I'd catch him doing something. I wasn't sure what yet, but I'd know it when I saw it. The bus dropped me off a block away and I raced to the bar, my heart pounding in my chest. I snuck in, avoiding the finance bros yelling about crypto, and found a corner booth with a view of the entrance. I ordered a soda to fit in, ignoring the bartender's sidelong glances when I didn't tip enough. 20 minutes later, he was there. Dylan, walking around like he owned the place, wore a leather jacket I'd never seen before and jeans that probably cost more than my rent. My little brother, the one who cried when I beat him at Mario Kart, was out here acting like a cheap Tony Soprano. I crouched down, pulled down my hat, and watched him scan the room. He didn't see me, thank God, because I wasn't ready for a fight in front of a drinking crowd. Then it happened. A guy walked up to him, maybe in his 40s, with slicked back hair and a suit that screamed, "I scam people for a living." They shook hands, cordially, and slid into a booth across from the bar. I couldn't hear them over the music, but I didn't need to. The way they leaned in, heads close together, handing each other what looked like a thick envelope. Yeah, this wasn't a book club meeting. I fumbled for my phone, my hands sweaty, and snapped a few blurry photos from under the table. Not exactly Pulitzer-worthy, but enough to prove Dylan wasn't up to much good. They talked for maybe 10 minutes, all nodding solemnly and glancing around. Then Suit Guy handed Dylan another envelope, this one bulging as if it were stuffed with cash. Dylan grinned, the same cocky grin he'd used when he'd cheated me out of my Halloween candy. I zoomed in, watching him stuff the envelope into his jacket. My stomach dropped. It wasn't loose change. It was thousands, maybe more. Where did he get the money? And what did he give up in exchange for it? I sat there, sipping my soda. Dylan wasn't just into selling houses. He was deep into something bigger, something that involved shady guys and cash dropped into bars. I thought about the loan payment note I'd found, the salesperson's comment about the sale moving too quickly. Was that relevant? Was Dylan selling our house to raise money for what? A startup? A drug deal? I was so caught up in my own conspiracy theories that I barely saw him leave. He stood up, patted Suit Guy on the shoulder, and headed for the door. I waited a beat, then followed, keeping my distance like I'd seen in every movie. I tried to sleep, but my mind wouldn't shut up. I kept seeing him as a kid, begging me to read him one more story, then that smirk in the bar. How do you go from bedtime stories to this? The next day I decided to dig deeper, but not by stalking him again. That was a one-way ticket to a restraining order. Instead, I called up Mikey, Dylan's old high school friend, who was always too nice to himself. We met at a diner, the kind with sticky tables and waitresses who called you honey. "Jasmine, damn, it's been a while," Mikey said, sliding into the booth with a grin. He looked the same, hair down, band t-shirt, as if time had forgotten him. "What's going on? You okay?" I got straight to the point, no time for small talk. "Mikey, what's Dylan doing? Like, who's he hanging out with? Anything weird?" His smile faded and he poked at his fries, suddenly fascinated by ketchup. Dylan? I don't know, man. He's changed. Started hanging out with shady guys a while back. Said he'd make a lot of money." I leaned forward, forgetting my coffee. "What kind of guys? And how much money?" Mikey sobbed like he'd been dreading this. He was involved in some gambling, poker, sports betting, that shit. A ton of debt, 5 figures. I told him to leave, but he laughed it off. Then a few months ago, he showed up in a new car, said he paid it all off. Bragged about some deal he was working on, but he wouldn't tell me. Said it was family business. Family business. My blood ran cold. The house. Cash in the bar. Dylan suddenly lit up. I nudged Mikey harder. "Did he mention our house? Or me?" He shook his head, but his eyes darted away. "Not you, it's just, he said your family was in trouble and he was fixing things up." I didn't ask, Jazz. I thought it was private. Private, yes. Private, like selling the house and framing me as the saboteur. I thanked Mikey, paid for his fries, and left, my head buzzing like a hornet's nest. Dylan owed money. Dylan paid it. Dylan called it family business. It was starting to make sense, and I hated every bit of it. That night, I was back in my dorm, staring at my laptop, trying to find information about Maple Grove LLC, the company that bought our house. Nothing, just a generic website with photos of smiling realtors. I was about to give up when my phone lit up, another message from Dylan out of nowhere. "Stop poking around, Jazz. You're making it worse." I froze, my thumb hovering over the screen. Worse? Worse for whom? I started to type a reply, all caps and swearing, but then stopped. He knew I was digging. How? Had he seen me at the bar? Someone tipped him off? My paranoia was at its peak, but I didn't back down. If he thought a vague text could scare me, he clearly didn't remember who won our sibling fights. I leaned back, the thin dorm mattress creaking beneath me, and stared at the ceiling. Dylan was gambling, dealing cash, lying about fixing things, and I was the stupid little sister who trusted him, who thought he was just a dumb kid with big dreams. But I wasn't done yet. I needed more than blurry photos and Mikey's word. I needed proof, the kind that could hold up in a court of law, or at least in a family argument. I picked up my phone and texted my friend Lena, a law classmate who had interned at a notary office last summer. She owed me for helping her study for her exams, and I was making money. Hey, I need information on selling real estate. It's urgent. Lena was curious enough to agree without asking too many questions, which was exactly what I needed. Lena was quicker than I expected. 3 days after my text, she snuck into my dorm with a folder thicker than my criminal law textbook and a grin that made her smell blood. You owe me a lot, yes, she said, tossing the folder onto my bed like it was contraband. This wasn't easy to get. I didn't even say hello, just ripped it open, my hands shaking with fear and coffee. Inside were copies of our house purchase papers, all stamped and official. But the more I read, the more sick I felt. My parents' signatures? They were forgeries. I'd seen their scribbles enough times on transcripts and licenses to know they weren't right, too neat. Too expert. Worse, my seal, the stupid personal seal I'd lost, was there, plain as day, except I hadn't signed a single word. Lena, what's this? I asked, my voice sharp enough to cut through my own panic. She leaned down, pointing to a line buried in the small print. The proceeds from the sale, hundreds of thousands, were transferred to a shell company, Grove Investments. Guess who's listed as the contact? She paused for effect, as if we were in a courtroom drama. Dylan Rojas. I stared at her, my brain short-circuiting. Dylan. My Dylan, the one who cried because I ate his last Pop-Tart, had forged our parents' signatures, stolen my seal, and transferred our entire family's life savings to some shady account. I wanted to laugh because otherwise I would scream until my lungs gave out. He faked the whole thing? I managed, sounding like I'd been punched. Yeah, Lena said, rolling off the P's like this was some juicy gossip. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. Your brother is either a genius or an idiot working for a genius. Genius? Dylan? The guy who failed algebra twice? No way. But idiot? I could afford it, especially after seeing him tough it out with that asshole in a suit. I thanked Lena, promised her coffee for life, and sent her out so I could deal with it myself. The file lay on the bed, taunting me. Each page was another nail in the coffin of my trust in my brother. It got worse. Lena's contact dug deeper. Dylan had concocted a story about loan sharks circling our family, claiming they'd burn the house down if my parents didn't sell. It was complete bullshit, but he'd sold it hard enough to scare them into signing me, or so he thought. What was the real deal? He'd used my seal to make it look like I'd agreed to the deal, like I knew about his kid. My own brother had framed me as the mastermind. I sat there staring at the ceiling, my irony meter broken. Dylan hadn't just betrayed us, he'd choreographed it, down to every line. And for what? To fund a pipe dream with a guy who looked like he sold fake Rolexes? I thought about the envelopes stuffed with cash at the bar, Mikey's story about Dylan's debt. It was clear he'd gambled himself into a hole, then sold our house to get out, throwing me under the bus to cover his tracks. I needed to hear from someone who knew the truth. Not Dylan, but Dad. He'd been quiet since that text, and I wasn't waiting for him to calm down. It took a while, but I tracked him down to a rundown motel on the edge of town. I knocked on his door, half expecting him to slam it in my face. Instead, he opened the door, looking like he'd aged 10 years. Gray stubble, dark circles under his eyes, a flannel shirt that smelled like cheap whiskey. "Jasmine," he said, his voice hoarse, "what are you doing here?" "God, Dad, I don't know," I snapped, pushing him into the room. It was a mess. Takeout boxes, crumpled clothes, a staticky TV. And probably here because you sold the house, trashed my stuff, and said I wasn't your son anymore. "Do you want to explain?" He plopped down on the bed, rubbing his face as if he could wipe away the guilt. "It shouldn't have been like this," he insisted. "Dylan," he said, "we were in deep trouble. Said some guy was after us because, debt. He said selling was the only way." "Debt?" I laughed, bitter and loud. Dad, I don't have debt, and neither do you or Mom. Dylan lied. He forged your signatures, used my seal, and took the money. All of it. His eyes widened and he fell back, but I was too angry to feel it. He had believed Dylan's sad story, never even asking me if it was true. I wanted to shake him, scream that he had chosen the wrong child to trust, but he looked so broken that I couldn't. You should have called me, I said instead, my voice cold. Now we have nothing. I left him there, his apology following me like smoke. Back at the dorm, I paced like a caged animal, Lena's file burning a hole in my desk. Dylan had played all of us, Mom, Dad, me, like we were pawns in his personal casino. And the worst part of me still wanted to save him, to pull him out of whatever mess he'd made. Stupid, right? But I wasn't here to play hero. I was here to end this. I texted my parents, arranged a meeting at their new apartment, a cramped one I'd found through a tip from a cousin. If you have ever faced a painful truth from a loved one, did you choose to confront or stay silent? Share your experience in the comments section. Dylan did the same, though I knew he'd shy away unless I coaxed him. We need to talk, all of us. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. No threats, no details, just enough to make him sweat. Then my mom called, her voice a frantic whisper. Jasmine, please, she said as if she were begging for her life. Don't do this. Dylan, he's in trouble. Real trouble? Mom, he's in trouble, I replied, losing